Hi guys, I'm Caleb, and the security event I'm going to talk about today is the Experian Court Ventures data breach that occurred between 2010 and 2012. So before we get into the attack, I want to give a little bit of background on Court Ventures. So Court Ventures is an American company that aggregates data from a variety of public records. And during the time of this data breach, Court Ventures had a data sharing agreement with another company called US InfoSearch. And US InfoSearch was known for collecting more sensitive data on American citizens. And in 2012, Court Ventures was purchased by Experian, which it is still a subsidiary of today. So, an introduction to the attack. Between 2010 and 2012, a Vietnamese teen found huge financial success by gaining access to Court Ventures' database. So, Hugh Min Ngo sold identity records containing social security numbers, addresses, emails, and even more sensitive information. And he had a very simple motivation. He wanted to make money as fast as possible. And he did. Before being caught, Ngo had earned over 3 million through this attack and others. So the attacker Ngo was immersed in hacking and exploiting vulnerabilities from a young age. And this is because when he was born in Vietnam, his family owned a tech store. So he was around technology from a young age and he was very comfortable with it. And his first foray into technological attacks was stealing credit card information from his university while he was studying abroad in New Zealand. And after that, he graduated to selling identities on a couple of darknet sites called FindGet.me and SuperGet.info. And before I get into the attack, I just want to discuss why I think it's important to study. And there's a couple reasons for this. So, firstly, the method that was used in this attack is not the first that comes to mind when you're thinking about building a technologically secure system. Two, it was very successful financially and thus will surely inspire similar attacks. And three, it highlighted the way that consumer data privacy and security is handled, even by wealthy companies with the resources to handle this securely. And we've seen similar events with companies like Facebook recently. So for the attack itself, no technological attack was needed. And Ngo's primary method of attack on Court Ventures is called social engineering. And social engineering is defined by the Oxford Languages Dictionary as the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that can then be used for fraudulent purposes. So, how did Ngo socially engineer Court Ventures employees to gain access? And the short answer is lies. So he used email and telephone communications, as well as forged legal documents like ID, birth certificate, etc., to convince company employees that he was a US-based private investigator, when in reality he was living in Singapore at the time. And so an example attack vector for this is to create his false identity. He then had to reach out to Court Ventures and convince them of his authenticity. After this, he gained access to their database and then resold the data online. So this attack highlights how difficult it is to defend a system because Court Ventures could have had very stringent technological security protocols, but it wouldn't have mattered because all he had to do was socially engineer their employees to gain access. And once he had this access, he sold what are called fulls to customers on the dark web. And fulls contained very sensitive information about individuals, such as their address, their social security number, their email address, bank account numbers, their passwords, and more. So, in terms of the damage, um, The Secret Service agent assigned to bringing Ngo into custody said, I don't know of any other cyber criminal who has caused more material financial harm to more Americans than Ngo. And his reselling of identity information is estimated to enable roughly $1 billion worth of fraud. And this attack damaged the credit of thousands of Americans. Identity theft is a very damaging crime to the individuals, and they often suffer enough financial and social damage to send their life into complete disarray. So, Ngo was quoted as saying, when I was in jail at Beaumont, Texas, I talked to one of the correctional officers there who shared with me a story about her friend who lost her identity and then lost everything after that. So, as you can see, this can be a terrible crime and cause a large amount of suffering to those affected. So, the repercussions for this attack in 2015, Mo was sentenced to 13 years in US prison for this and his other cyber attacks. And this attack really demonstrated that security measures need to be technologically strict, but also socially strict, and that a high level of vigilance is required on the part of court ventures and other companies that handle sensitive consumer data. This really exposed the general negligence in regards to the way consumer data is treated because there were multiple tells that Ngo's activity was suspicious. One of these is he claimed to be a USPI, but always paid court ventures through wire payments out of Singapore. And that's really something that should have been noticed. So this attack damaged public trust in Experian and court ventures, and I think big data as a whole. And as a result, a class action lawsuit, Patent versus Experian, was filed, but ultimately failed. So some people would argue that Experian or court ventures got off too easy. What do you think? Should their failure to protect consumer data be considered criminal? And additionally, what are some defenses that we could use to protect systems from social engineering so that they are not only technologically secure, but also socially secure? And lastly, here are my references.